Under the fractured moon, scars whispered secrets that the wind dared not carry. Virea Ashen stumbled through the iron gates of the trial ring, her bare feet sinking into the frost-laced earth that drank her blood like an old lover's kiss. The air was a blade, sharp with the scent of pine and impending storm, whipping her tattered rags against the welts that crisscrossed her back. Each step pulled at the fresh brands, twisted runes of rejection seared into her flesh by the pack's executioners. They had called her cursed, a blight on the bloodline, an omega whose whispers in the night had twisted the minds of warriors. Lies, all of it, born from envy and the fear of what she might become. But truth mattered little in the shadow of the Elder's decree. Exile through trial, or death in the dirt. The ring encircled her like a predator's maw, a vast coliseum carved from the bones of ancient mountains, its walls etched with the howls of forgotten alphas. Torches flickered along the rim, their flames dancing in the howling gale, casting elongated shadows that clawed at the snow-dusted ground. Above, the moon hung low and bloated, its silver light bleeding through ragged clouds, illuminating the assembled packs. Hundreds of eyes, predatory, gleaming, watched from the tiered stone seats. Alphas from every northern clan, their fur cloaks heavy with the musk of dominance, their breaths visible puffs in the frigid night. Betas and omegas huddled in their wake, murmuring prayers to the goddess. But Virea heard only the rhythm of her own heart, a thunder that echoed the distant weevo of wolves on the prowl. She had been Virea of the Ashen Pack once, daughter of a healer whose herbs could mend bone and spirit alike. But that was before the raid, before the rival clans accused her of summoning shadows to sabotage their hunts. Tortured in the depths of the ice caverns, her skin flayed until the pain blurred into numbness, she had confessed nothing. The scars were her testament now, a map of endurance etched in raised, silvery lines that pulsed under the lunar glow. One in particular, a crescent moon arcing across her collarbone, burned hottest tonight, a mark she bore since birth, dismissed as a flaw by those who feared its pull. The crowd's roar swelled as the gates clanged shut behind her, sealing her fate. "Fight or fall!" bellowed the herald, his voice a guttural command that silenced the wind. The trial ring demanded blood. Omegas like her were fodder, thrown to the alphas to prove their worth or break in the attempt. Virea's knees buckled, not from fear, but from the weight of isolation. No mate awaited her redemption here, no kin to claim her survival. She was alone, the outcast whose very scent, faint wildflowers crushed under iron, invited only contempt. From the shadowed alcoves, the challengers emerged. First came Thorn Blackfang, alpha of the Iron Claws, his massive frame rippling with muscle beneath a pelt of midnight fur. His eyes, yellow as forge embers, fixed on her with a hunger that was more conquest than combat. He circled slowly, paws crunching the frost, lips curling back to reveal fangs stained with the blood of prior trials. "Little scarred one," he growled, his voice rumbling like avalanche stones. "You'll beg for the mercy I deny." The crowd cheered, a wave of feral approval that shook the torch flames. Virea pressed her palms to the cold earth, feeling the earth's pulse beneath her. A faint vibration, like the heartbeat of something ancient stirring. Her breath came in shallow bursts, fogging the air as memories flooded her. The cavern's drip of melting ice on her wounds, the Elder's chants sealing her doom. Why fight? The goddess had forsaken her, or so they claimed. Yet as Thorn lunged, his claws extended like scythes, a strange calm settled over her. The crescent scar on her collarbone ignited, a warmth spreading through her veins like liquid moonlight. She didn't dodge. Instead, she rose, arms outstretched, and whispered words she hadn't known she possessed, ancient syllables that tasted of starlight and sorrow. The air thickened, the wind howling in response, as if the moon itself leaned closer. Thorn froze mid-stride, his snarl twisting into confusion. His body trembled, not from rage, but from an unseen force coiling around him. One by one, the other alphas in the ring, hulking figures from the Stormfangs, the Frostbites, halted their advance. Their eyes widened, pupils dilating under the lunar scrutiny. Virea's voice grew, unbidden, a chant that wove through the night like silver thread. By the blood of the primordials, I call the oath. The words echoed, amplified by the ring's stone, and the torches flared brighter, casting the scene in stark relief. White snow stained red from old battles, gray rock veined with ice, the deep crimson of the Alpha's cloaks. Her scar glowed now, visible to all, a beacon that pulled at something deep within them. Thorn dropped to one knee, his massive head bowing as if compelled by an invisible chain. Murmurs rippled through the stands, disbelief turning to awe. Another Alpha followed, then another, their bodies folding in reverence, not to her frailty, but to the power she unwittingly unleashed. The last descendant, they would whisper later, of the guardians who once bound the packs under the moon's eternal watch. But in that moment, as the wind whipped her hair like a banner of defiance, Virea felt only the ache of revelation. The trial had just begun, and the scars that marked her shame now heralded a destiny she could scarcely comprehend. The moon watched, unblinking, as the ring transformed from arena of death to altar of awakening. What strength was this, born not of claw and fang, but of a wound refused to heal? The kneeling Alphas formed a circle of shadowed reverence around Virea, their breaths ragged in the frozen air, mingling with the scent of pine resin and smoldering torch smoke. The wind howled through the trial ring like a lament, tugging at her ragged hems and stirring the snow into whispering eddies that clung to her scarred skin. She stood frozen, her arms still outstretched, the crescent mark on her collarbone throbbing with a heat that seeped into her bones, chasing away the chill of her exile. What had she done? The words had spilled from her lips unbidden, ancient and resonant, pulling these warriors, beasts of fang and fury, down to their knees as if the moon itself had commanded it. Fear coiled in her gut, sharp as the brands on her back, for power like this was a double-edged blade, one that could sever her from the fragile humanity she clung to. From the highest tier, where the elders of the northern pack sat enthroned in firs and frost-rimed stone, a murmur rose like distant thunder. But it was not outrage that broke the silence. It was a deeper hush, laced with the weight of forgotten lore. Virea's gaze swept the bowed heads, their antlered helms glinting under the fractured moonlight, until it snagged on him, the one who knelt not in submission, but in a solitude that mirrored her own. He was apart from the others, a figure carved from the night itself, his broad shoulders hunched beneath a cloak of raven feathers, edged in silver thread. King Irik Stormcrown, sovereign of the united clans, whispered his name in the pack's fireside tales, the Alpha who had united fractured territories through blood and uneasy pacts, only to bear the scars of those victories in his haunted eyes. His hair, dark as raven wings, fell unbound across a face marked by the ravages of endless winters, high cheekbones shadowed by stubble, lips pressed into a line of perpetual restraint. But it was his eyes that held her, stormy gray, flecked with the blue of glacial depths, now fixed on her with an intensity that pierced the veil of her defenses. Irik had come to the trial ring not as spectator, but as judge, his presence a reminder of the fragile alliances he forged to stave off the encroaching wars from the southern borders. Whispers said he was cursed, bound by a vow to the goddess after a betrayal that cost him his first mate, a rival Alpha's poisoned blade in the night, blamed on his own leniency toward a rogue Omega. Guilt clung to him like frost on iron, etching lines around his mouth, making his every command an echo of remorse. He had knelt, yes, compelled by the lunar oath she invoked, but now he rose slowly, his movements deliberate, as if testing the chains of fate that bound him. The crowd shifted uneasily as he descended the tiers, his boots crunching the snow with the weight of unspoken burdens. The other alphas remained prostrate, their heads bowed to the earth. But Virea felt the pull toward him, an instinctive tether, like the moon drawing the tide. Her pulse quickened, a wild rhythm that echoed the distant weavos of wolves calling to their lost kin. Fear warred with curiosity in her chest. This was no mere challenger, but a king whose scent, smoke and storm, and the faint metallic tang of old blood wrapped around her senses, stirring something primal she dared not name. He stopped a breath away, towering over her yet offering no threat, his cloak parting to reveal the glint of a silver torque around his neck, etched with runes that mirrored her scar. Up close, the lines of exhaustion were stark, a faint scar tracing his jaw, the subtle tremor in his hand as he extended it, palm up, in a gesture of parley rather than dominance. "Omega," he murmured, his voice a low rumble like thunder rolling over mountains, laced with a melancholy that softened its edges. "What ancient fire have you kindled in this place of ash?" Virea's breath caught, the warmth of her scar flaring brighter under his gaze, as if it recognized him. She wanted to recoil, to deny the spark that ignited between them, a connection born not of desire, but of shared wounds, instinctive and unwelcome. He was everything she had been taught to fear. Power, incarnate, a alpha whose mercy was whispered to be as rare as summer in the north. Yet in his eyes, she saw no conquest, only a quiet curiosity shadowed by the guilt that haunted his steps. I don't know," she whispered, her voice trembling like the torch flames in the gale. The words felt like a confession, raw and exposed, her body aching from the trials of her exile, the flayed skin, the isolation that had hollowed her soul. Irik's hand hovered, not touching, but close enough that she felt the heat radiating from his skin, a counterpoint to the biting cold. The wind whipped between them, carrying the scent of impending snow, and for a moment the ring faded, the kneeling alphas, the watchful moon, the elders' stunned silence, all dissolving into the visceral pull of this encounter. She rationalized it away, survival's trick, Omega's instinct to seek protection in the storm. But deeper, curiosity bloomed like a fragile flower in frost, wondering at the king who knelt first, who looked at her scars not with pity, but with the recognition of his own hidden fractures. A low growl rippled from the stands as one elder rose, his face twisted in fury. "This is blasphemy. The trial demands blood, not bows." Shouts erupted, the fragile awe shattering into chaos, alphas stirring from their trance as the lunar pull waned. Irik's eyes never left hers, a silent promise or warning lingering in their depths. He stepped closer, shielding her from the rising tide of unrest, his presence a bulwark against the storm. The connection hummed, denied yet undeniable, born of fear that masked a deeper curiosity. What if this scarred Omega held the key to his redemption, as he might to hers? As the first flakes of snow began to fall, veiling the ring in white, Virea felt the weight of choice settle upon her. To flee this gaze, or to lean into the unknown warmth it offered. The moon watched, its light fracturing on the fresh powder, illuminating the path not yet taken. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The snow fell thicker now, a veil of white fury that blurred the edges of the trial ring, turning the ancient Colosseum into a spectral arena where shadows and light waged their silent war. Virea's breath came in ragged gasps, the cold seeping into her lungs like a thief. But it was Irik's nearness that anchored her amid the rising chaos. His body formed a barrier against the tide of enraged alphas stirring from their compelled kneel, their growls rising like the first rumbles of an avalanche. The elders' shouts pierced the gale. "Seize the witch! The oath is broken." And the air thickened with the metallic tang of drawn steel, the musk of aggression uncoiling from fur-clad forms. She had invoked something forbidden, a lunar pact etched into the bones of the world, and now the pacts turned, their reverence curdling into betrayal. Irik's hand finally closed around her wrist, not in dominance, but in urgent protection, his grip firm yet yielding, the calluses of a warrior's palm rough against her scarred skin. "Come," he commanded, low and steady, his stormy eyes locking onto hers with a resolve that brooked no argument. The warmth from his touch traveled up her arm, chasing the chill that had long nested in her bones, but she resisted the pull, her mind a whirlwind of denial. This king, with his crown of unspoken sorrows, was no savior. He was the architect of the very laws that had condemned her. Yet instinct overrode reason, her omega senses latching onto his scent, smoke-wreathed pine and the faint salty bite of ancient guilt, as if it were a lifeline in the storm. They moved as one, Irik guiding her toward the shadowed underbelly of the ring, where the mountain's roots delved deep into frost-veined caverns. The pursuing alphas crashed through the snow behind them, their howls a cacophony that echoed off the stone walls, mingling with the wind's mournful wail. Vereya's feet bled anew on the jagged ice, each step a fire that mirrored the burn in her crescent scar, now pulsing in rhythm with Irik's heartbeat. She glanced back once, seeing the torches flare like angry eyes, the moonlight fracturing on blades raised in pursuit. The common enemy was the pacts themselves, the rigid hierarchies that devoured the weak, the elders who clung to power through fear. In this flight, empathy flickered to life between them, fragile as a spark in the gale. He, the burdened king shielding an outcast, she, the scarred Omega whose unwitting power had humbled him. They plunged into the cavern's maw, the world above swallowed by darkness, pierced only by the faint glow of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls like forgotten stars. The air grew heavier here, laced with the mineral tang of deep earth and the drip of melting ice, a sanctuary carved by eons of glacial fury. Irik released her wrist, but stayed close, his broad frame blocking the entrance as he wedged a fallen boulder into place with a grunt that reverberated through the stone. Snow sifted through cracks, dusting his raven hair with white, and for the first time, Vereya saw the weariness etched deeper into his features, the subtle sag of shoulders that bore the weight of a fractured realm. She backed away, pressing against the cavern wall, the cold rock biting into her welts like accusatory fingers. Her heart thundered, not just from the chase, but from the intimacy of this refuge, this unintended bond forged in desperation. "Why?" she demanded, her voice echoing softly, raw with the ache of isolation. "You could have let them take me. A king has no need for a cursed Omega's shadow." The words tasted bitter, laced with the philosophy of her suffering. What was strength, if not the choice to walk alone? But even as she spoke, curiosity gnawed at her defenses, drawing her gaze to the silver torque at his throat, its runes glowing faintly in the dim light, echoing the curve of her scar. Irik turned, his gray eyes softening in the gloom, reflecting the blue depths of hidden pools. He sank to one knee, not in obeisance this time, but to meet her level, his cloak pooling around him like spilled ink. The fire he kindled then was small, struck from flint and tinder in his pouch, its flames leaping to life with a crackle that warmed the air, casting golden flickers across his scarred jaw. "Because the moon chose you," he replied, his voice a velvet rumble threaded with melancholy. "And in its light, I see my own failures mirrored. I united the clans with claw and crown, but lost my heart to a betrayal I could not prevent. Guilt is my chain, Omega, Vereya. Yours is etched in flesh. We are both exiles in our thrones." The confession hung between them, heavier than the snow piling outside, and Viraya felt the walls of her resistance crack. Empathy bloomed, unbidden, as she watched the fire dance in his eyes, illuminating the ethical core beneath the king's armor, a man who wielded power not for glory, but to atone. She sank beside him, the heat of the flames licking at her chilled skin, thawing the numbness of her trials. The crescent scar warmed in response, a silent dialogue with his torque, as if the symbols themselves whispered of destinies intertwined. Outside, the howls grew distant, muffled by the storm, but the true tempest raged within, fear of this connection, rationalized as mere survival, yet deepening into something visceral, a bond born of shared wounds. As the fire steadied, casting long shadows that wove like threads of fate, Viraya extended a trembling hand toward the flames, feeling the pull of his presence beside her. The cavern's silence enveloped them, broken only by the soft pop of embers and their synchronized breaths. Two souls, marked by loss, finding refuge not in stone, but in the quiet choice to protect one another. The moon's light filtered through a high crevice, silvering the smoke, and in that glow, the first threads of trust wove through the pain. But beyond the boulder, the packs gathered, their betrayal a gathering storm. What mercy could heal when war loomed at the threshold? The warmth of the fire could not chase away the chill of what was to come, as the distant weavos called them back to the fray. The fire's glow carved hollows in the cavern's walls, turning the damp stone into a canvas of flickering gold and shadow, where secrets seemed to breathe in the pauses between crackling embers. Viraya sat cross-legged on the uneven floor, her scarred knees drawn close to the flames, the heat a tentative caress against the raw edges of her wounds. The silver torque at Irik's throat caught the light, its runes pulsing faintly in sync with her crescent mark, as if the symbols were veins connected by some unseen lunar thread. Outside, the storm raged unabated, a symphony of howling wind and muffled howls from the pursuing packs, their fury seeping through the cracks like smoke. But within this fragile sanctuary, the world narrowed to the space between them, the king's steady gaze and the Omega's guarded heart, each probing the other's silence for truths too heavy to voice. She had rationalized his protection as necessity, a king's strategic mercy to unravel the mystery of her invocation. Yet as the night deepened, the pull grew insistent, a warmth uncoiling in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. Irik fed the flames with twists of dried moss from his pouch, his movements deliberate, betraying the ethical restraint that defined him, a ruler who weighed every action against the ghost of his failures. "The packs will not relent," he said at last, his voice a low timbre that resonated off the cavern's vaults, carrying the melancholy of endless northern nights. "They see in you a threat to the old ways, a reminder that power sleeps not only in fangs and thrones, but in the blood of the forgotten." His gray eyes, flecked with glacial blue, met hers without demand, only the quiet curiosity of one who had long wrestled with destiny's chains. Viraya's fingers traced the crescent scar absently, the skin there feverish now, alive with an undercurrent she could no longer ignore. It had always been a mark of shame, a birth flaw the elders had twisted into proof of her curse. But tonight, it hummed like a distant song, pulling at memories not her own. Flashes of ancient rites under full moons, women with eyes like starlit pools, weaving oaths that bound the wild to the wise. She shifted, the rough stone grinding against her welts, sending a sharp pang through her body that blurred her vision. "I am no threat," she whispered, her breath fogging in the chill air that lingered beyond the fire's reach. "I am broken, Irik, thrown away like chaff in the wind, what you felt in the ring. It was a fluke, a dying echo." Denial laced her words, a shield against the fear that this connection might demand more than survival. It might demand surrender. But as she spoke, the scar ignited, not with pain, but with a radiant clarity that flooded her veins like molten silver. The cavern seemed to tilt, the flames stretching into elongated tongues that licked at the air, revealing hidden veins of quartz in the walls, glowing with an inner luminescence. Viraya gasped, her hands flying to her collarbone as visions cascaded through her mind, not illusions, but revelations, sharp and visceral. She saw Irik's past unspool like a bloodied tapestry, the night of betrayal, his first mate's lifeless form in the snow, her throat torn not by an enemy blade, but by a poison born of his own pack's intrigue, a rival alpha's scheme to shatter his alliances. Guilt crashed over her like an icy wave, his remorse a tangible weight that pressed on her chest, making her own scars ache in sympathy. And deeper still, a path unfurled, threads of fate weaving through the northern clans, fractures mended not by war, but by a guiding light. A pathfinder, the last of the primordial guardians, whose blood could reveal the true oaths binding alphas to the goddess. The gift manifested fully then, unbidden and overwhelming, her voice emerging in a chant that wove through the air like moonlight on water. By the crescent's call, the hidden paths reveal, she intoned, the words ancient, tasting of frost and wild herbs on her tongue. The torque at Irik's neck flared in response, its runes igniting with a soft, ethereal blue, projecting visions onto the cavern walls, maps of forgotten territories, alliances poisoned by treachery, and at the center, a union that could heal the land. A scarred Omega and a guilt-ridden king, their bond, the key to true redemption. The fire roared higher, casting the scene in stark relief. The deep crimson of drying blood on her rags, the white gleam of ice formations overhead, the gray steel of Irik's resolve cracking under the weight of truth. He staggered to his feet, his face paling in the spectral light, stormy eyes wide with recognition. You are the pathfinder, he breathed, the words a revelation that shattered his melancholy armor. His hand reached out, not to claim, but to steady himself against the stone, as if the ground had shifted beneath his throne. The guilt that had haunted him for seasons, the belief that his leniency had doomed his mate, fracturing the clans into warring shadows, now reframed in her gift's unyielding clarity. She was no mere Omega. She was the key to his destiny, the one whose visions could guide him to expose the true traitors, to forge a realm not of iron rule, but of compassionate strength. The goddess marked you for this, he murmured, sinking beside her once more, the distance between them dissolving in the shared pulse of symbols. My curse. It ends with you. Not in conquest, but in the mercy I denied myself. Viraya recoiled at first, the intensity of the bond a storm within her, rationalized as the gift's cruel trickery. Her body trembled, the cold sweat of manifestation chilling her skin, the scent of scorched stone and ozone filling the air. Yet acceptance crept in, slow as dawn over snowfields, as she saw in his eyes the mirror of her own rebirth. Rejection transmuted into purpose. The crescent scar cooled, its warmth now a steady ember, linking their fates under the moon's distant watch. Outside, the howls drew nearer, the pack's betrayal a gathering thunder. But in this revelation, a deeper truth emerged. What was strength, if not embracing the path that healed another's wound? The visions faded, leaving the cavern hushed, the fire's embers glowing like eyes in the gloom. Irik's hand brushed hers, a tentative bridge, and Viraya did not pull away. The gift had awakened, binding them in lunar threads, but the trial of trust was only beginning. As the wind screamed through the crevice, carrying the promise of confrontation, she wondered, could redemption be forged in such fragile light, or would it demand a price steeper than blood? Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw the cavern's hush shattered like thin ice under a heavy paw, the wind's scream heralding the pack's inexorable advance. Verea's skin prickled with the scent of intrusion, wet fur and sharpened steel filtering through the boulder-sealed entrance, mingling with the acrid smoke of the dying fire. Her crescent scar throbbed in warning, a lunar pulse that synced with the distant thud of boots on stone, the low growls of alphas rallying their kin. Irik rose fluidly beside her, his hand lingering on hers a fraction longer than necessity demanded, a silent anchor in the brewing storm. The revelation of her gift hung between them like frost-laden air, heavy with unspoken implications. She, the pathfinder, bearer of truths that could unmake thrones. He, the king, whose guilt now found purpose in her light. Yet as the shadows lengthened, Verea felt the weight of choice descend, sharp as a blade's edge. Love's fragile tether, or the freedom of solitude, forgiveness for the betrayers, or the catharsis of war. He moved to the barricade, his raven cloak swirling like night itself, muscles coiling beneath his frame as he pressed an ear to the stone. "They come in force," he murmured, his voice a gravelly thread of resolve laced with the melancholy that shadowed his every breath. "The elders lead them, with Thorn Blackfang at their flank. He was the one who whispered poison into my first mate's ear, the traitor whose ambition fractured the clans." The confession sliced through the dimness, raw and unadorned, his stormy eyes meeting hers with a vulnerability that pierced her defenses. Verea's heart clenched, the visions from her gift replaying in flashes. Thorn's sly grin in the torchlight of that fateful night, the vial of toxin glinting like a serpent's fang. Her own past echoed in it, the Ashen Pack's elders who had branded her, their fear-mongered accusations, a betrayal born of the same hunger for control. She stood, the cavern's chill seeping into her bones despite the ember's faint warmth, her ragged hems whispering against the floor. The silver torque at Irik's throat caught the filtered moonlight, its runes a mirror to her scar, symbols that now felt less like curses and more like chains linking their fates. "Then face them," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, the words tasting of the earth's mineral bite. "But not for me. For the redemption you seek, the mercy you denied yourself." Philosophy wove through her tone, a quiet challenge. What was true strength, if not choosing compassion over the vengeance that had hollowed him? Yet fear gnawed at her core, rationalizing the bond as a fleeting illusion, her omega instincts urging flight from this entanglement that threatened her hard-won isolation. The boulder groaned under assault, chips of rock cascading like tears as claws and shoulders battered from without. Irik braced against it, his body a bulwark, but his gaze returned to her, searching. "And you, Pathfinder, will you guide me through this, or walk the path alone?" The question hung, a moral crossroads illuminated by the crevice's silver beam. To bind her destiny to his, embracing love as redemption's proof, or to sever it, claiming freedom in the wild unknown. Before she could answer, the entrance buckled with a thunderous crack, snow and debris exploding inward in a white maelstrom. Thorn Blackfang burst through first, his midnight fur matted with frost, yellow eyes blazing with feral triumph. Behind him surged the elders of the northern packs, grizzled figures in steel-gray robes, their faces twisted in righteous fury, and a phalanx of alphas from the iron claws and storm fangs, blades drawn, breaths heaving like bellows in the cold. The cavern filled with their musk, overpowering the fire's dying scent, torches raised high to cast the intruders in harsh, dancing light. Crimson cloaks stark against white-dusted stone, the deep blue of glacial eyes narrowed in accusation. "Seize the king and the witch!" Thorn bellowed, his voice echoing off the vaults like an avalanche's roar. Fangs bared in a snarl that revealed the scars of old battles. He lunged forward, claws extended, but Irik met him mid-stride, their bodies colliding with a visceral thud that shook the ground. Fists and fangs flew in a blur of motion, Irik's ethical restraint giving way to the raw necessity of survival, his strikes precise, born of a warrior's discipline tempered by guilt. Blood sprayed, warm and coppery, splattering the cavern floor and mingling with melting snow into rivulets of red that snaked toward Verea's feet. The air thickened with grunts and the wet smack of flesh, the wind from the breach howling in accompaniment, whipping torch flames into frenzied spirals. Verea pressed against the wall, her heart a war drum, the crescent scar igniting with a searing clarity that blurred the chaos into prophetic fragments. She saw Thorn's treachery unmasked, not just the poisoning of Irik's mate, but a web of alliances sold to southern invaders. Fractures in the packs widened for his ascension. The elders, complicit in her own exile, had turned a blind eye, their moral decay a poison deeper than any blade. Her gift surged, unbidden, a chant rising in her throat that stilled the fray for a heartbeat. By blood and moon, the traitor's veil is torn. The torque and scar blazed in unison, projecting the visions onto the cavern walls. Thorn's shadowed dealings, the vial's gleam, the pack's hidden rifts glowing like veins of quartz under lunar fire. The intruders faltered, gasps rippling through their ranks as truth clawed free. Thorn whirled on her, murder in his gaze, but Irik struck true. A blow that sent the traitor sprawling into the snow-slick stone, blood blooming from his lip like a crimson flower. The elders recoiled, their authority crumbling under the weight of revelation, whispers of doubt fracturing their unity. Yet Thorn rose, defiant, rallying his loyalists with a guttural roar, the cavern erupting into full melee, blades clashing with metallic shrieks, bodies slamming against walls in sprays of frost and ichor. Verea dodged a lunging beta, her body aching from old welts reopened by the fray, the cold air burning her lungs as she scrambled toward Irik. He fought like a tempest contained, melancholy fueling his fury, each parry a step toward atonement. But as Thorn circled for another assault, Verea's choice crystallized amid the blood and howls. Forgiveness for the pack's blindness, a war waged not in slaughter, but in truth's light, or the freedom to let it all burn, severing her from this king whose touch now felt like destiny's inexorable pull. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the din like silver moonlight. Enough! The goddess demands judgment, not rivers of blood. The words carried her gift's power, halting the combatants in a tense standoff, breaths ragged, eyes locked on her scarred form. Thorn sneered, wiping blood from his maw, his form hulking in the torchlight. You think visions sway us, scarred one. The old ways demand your head, and his crown. Irik, chest heaving, positioned himself between them, his hand finding hers in the chaos, a bridge of warmth amid the ethical storm. The packs watched, the air electric with possibility. War's red tide, or compassion's fragile dawn. Verea's pulse thundered, the scar's heat a reminder of Renascimento's cost. Love as proof, not prize. Demanding she choose not for survival, but for the soul-deep mercy that could heal a fractured world. Outside, the moon climbed higher, its fractured light spilling through the breach like spilled blood, illuminating the dilemma that teetered on a knife's edge. Would she forgive the betrayers, binding her freedom to Irik's redemption, or unleash the war that freedom promised, at the cost of all they had begun to forge? The wind carried the weavos of undecided fates, and in that suspended breath, Verea felt the true trial begin, not of claw and fang, but of the heart's unyielding choice. The cavern pulsed with the raw aftershock of halted violence, the air thick with the coppery reek of blood and the acrid bite of sweat-soaked fur, as if the stone itself recoiled from the spilled fury. Verea's hand trembled in Irik's grasp, the warmth of his calloused fingers a defiant anchor against the chill that clawed at her bones, seeping through the jagged breach where snow swirled in vengeful eddies. Her crescent scar burned like a forge's heart, its silver glow casting ethereal fractals across the intruders' faces. Thorn's snarl twisted in the half-light, the elder's eyes wide with the dawning horror of exposed sins. The moon's fractured beam pierced the chaos, illuminating rivulets of crimson tracing the floor, mingling with melting ice into a sacred ink that wrote their fates in red and white. She had chosen words over weapons. Her gifts chant a fragile dam against the flood of war, but now the true reckoning pressed upon her. Sacrifice the fragile union blooming in Irik's touch, or heal the fractures with a mercy that might demand her own unmaking. Thorn lunged again, his massive frame a blur of midnight pelt and bared fangs, yellow eyes locked on her like a predator scenting weakness. "Visions mean nothing to the strong," he roared, his voice a guttural thunder that shook loose crystals from the vaulted ceiling, raining down like frozen tears. The loyalists surged with him, blades whistling through the air, their howls a chorus of betrayal that drowned the wind's lament. Irik released her hand only to intercept, his body a storm of controlled fury, ethical restraint shattering into the raw necessity of protection, his fist connecting with Thorn's jaw in a crack that echoed like breaking bone. Blood arced, warm droplets splattering Vereya's cheek, tasting of salt and sorrow on her lips. She staggered back, the caverns spinning in visceral flashes, the deep blue of Irik's eyes flashing with glacial resolve, the gray steel of drawn swords glinting under torchlight, the white fury of snow invading like an uninvited witness. Her mind fractured under the onslaught, introspection a slow unraveling amid the melee's frenzy. What was this bond, if not a test of the soul's endurance? She had rationalized it as survival's cruel jest, an Omega's instinct latching onto power in the void of rejection. But now it bloomed undeniable, a tenderness forged in shared scars, resisted until the pain of separation outweighed the fear. Irik fought not for glory, but for the redemption her visions promised, his melancholy a quiet fire that illuminated the ethical core she had glimpsed in the firelight. A king who chose mercy's blade over vengeance's crown. Yet freedom whispered temptations. A solitary path through the wilds where no throne could chain her, no guilt could echo her own. The pack's betrayal mirrored her exile, the elders who had branded her flesh now cowering from truths they had sown, and forgiveness felt like surrender, war like the catharsis her wounds craved. A beta's claw raked her arm, tearing through rags and skin in a blaze of agony that grounded her, blood welling hot and immediate, staining the snow-dusted floor. Vereya cried out, the sound lost in the clash of bodies, but her scar ignited fiercer, the lunar gift surging like a tidal wave. She rose amid the fray, arms outstretched, the chant spilling from her depths unbidden. By the primordial's blood, let the paths converge or part. The air hummed, thickening with an otherworldly pressure, the torque at Irik's throat blazing in harmony, its runes projecting a cascade of visions onto the cavern walls, Thorn's treacheries laid bare in luminous threads, the southern invaders' shadows creeping like wolves at the borders, and at the nexus, a choice, her sacrifice to seal the oaths, healing the clans through union, or her flight, leaving war's red harvest to devour them all. The combatants froze, breaths ragged in the suspended hush, eyes drawn to the spectral maps flickering like auroras on stone. Thorn faltered, his snarl crumbling into doubt as the weight of his ambition's cost pressed upon him, the mate's poisoned end, the pack's rifts widened for a throne now slipping from his grasp. The elders dropped to their knees, not in reverence, but in the crush of revelation, their gray robes pooling like ash in the snow. Mercy, one whispered, voice cracking like thin ice, the word of philosophy etched in the silence. What strength lay in compassion, if not the power to rebuild what claws had torn? Irik turned to her, chest heaving, blood trickling from a gash on his brow to trace the scar on his jaw like a crimson tear. His stormy gaze held no demand, only the melancholic plea of a soul teetering on redemption's edge. "Virea," he murmured, voice raw as wind-scoured rock. "The goddess offers union, not chains. Heal with me, or go, and let the wild claim what freedom demands." The choice crystallized in her core, a moral forge hotter than any brand. Love was no reward, but proof, a redemptive fire tested in the crucible of pain. She stepped forward, ignoring the throb of her wounds, the cold wind whipping her hair like a banner of rebirth. Her hand found his once more, fingers intertwining with a resolve that chased the isolation from her veins. "Union," she declared, her voice steady, carrying the weight of ancient oaths. The scar and torque merged in a blaze of silver light, the visions coalescing into a binding glow that enveloped them, mending the air's fractures with threads of lunar silk. Thorn collapsed, not slain, but broken, his ambition yielding to the truth's inexorable tide. The packs bowed, their howls shifting from rage to a reverent chorus under the moon's unblinking eye. Healing rippled outward, a visceral wave that soothed reopened welts on her skin, eased the guilt's shadow from Irik's features, turning his melancholy to quiet wonder. The cavern transformed, no longer a tomb of conflict, but an altar of renascimento, where blood and snow mingled into sacred earth. Yet sacrifice lingered in the union's wake, her freedom tempered by duty, his throne shared with compassion's crown. They emerged into the storm's dying breath, the packs parting like waves before a tide, the moon whole now above the mountains, its light a benediction on their intertwined scars. Tenderness bloomed in the aftermath, a slow unfurling amid the pain. His arm around her shoulders, shielding from the wind, her head against his chest, hearing the steady thunder of a heart no longer haunted alone. But redemption's flame demanded vigilance. Whispers of southern shadows stirred on the horizon, tests yet to come. In that fragile peace, Virea felt the rebirth settle, a destiny not imposed but chosen. Love as the ultimate proof, weaving rejection into the tapestry of eternal thrones. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive. The moon's light spilled over the cavern's breach like molten silver, weaving through the settling snow to illuminate the transformed fray, a tableau of bowed heads and bloodied stone, where the pack's howls softened into a reverent dirge, echoing the wind's final sighs. Virea's breath steadied in the hush, her fingers still entwined with Irik's, the crescent scar on her collarbone, a steady ember now, its warmth a bridge between their pulses. The union she had chosen pulsed through her veins like liquid starlight, mending the jagged edges of her wounds with an ethereal grace. But the weight of sacrifice lingered, heavy as the frost-crusted air. Freedom's whisper had faded, not silenced, but transmuted into something deeper. A destiny shared, where love proved itself not in easy embrace, but in the raw surrender of self to another's healing. Her body ached from the melee, the fresh gash on her arm throbbing in rhythm with the cavern's drip of melting ice. But the pain felt distant, reframed by the lunar glow that bathed them both. Irik's stormy eyes met hers, the glacial flecks softened by a wonder that chased the shadows of guilt from his features. His raven hair clung damply to his brow, streaked with crimson from the fight, and the silver torque at his throat hummed faintly, its runes a mirror to her scar, symbols now fused in the air's subtle vibration. He drew her closer, his arm encircling her shoulders with a gentleness that belied the king's warrior frame, shielding her from the intruding chill as if she were the fragile core of his fractured realm. The packs watched from the periphery, their forms hulking silhouettes in the torchlight. Thorn sprawled defeated, his yellow eyes dimmed to embers of resignation, the elders murmuring oaths of fealty under the moon's unyielding gaze. The scent of blood and pine resin hung thick, mingling with the mineral tang of the deep earth, a visceral reminder that redemption was forged in the crucible of spilled life, not spared. Yet as the healing wave receded, leaving the cavern in a profound silence, broken only by the soft patter of snow through the breach, Viraya felt the ethical undercurrent stir, a dilemma spiritual that clawed at her core. What was this union, if not a sacrifice of her solitary rebirth? She had been the outcast, the scarred Omega cast into exile's maw, her spirit tempered in isolation's fire. To bind herself to Irik meant yielding the wild freedom she had glimpsed in her visions, paths untrodden through endless winter forests, where no throne demanded her light, no guilt echoed her own. Compassion warred with the pull of power, forgiving the pack's betrayals, the brands on her back, the elders' poisoned decrees, required a mercy that might hollow her further, turning her gift into a chain rather than a crown. "Irik," she whispered, her voice a thread of frost-laced silk, pulling back slightly to search his face. "This healing, it costs us both. Your throne, my wanderlust. Is love truly redemption, or just another cage gilded in moonlight?" He paused, his breath visible in the cold. The melancholy that had etched his soul now tempered by the resolve her choice had ignited. His free hand rose to trace the air near her scar, not touching but honoring the space between, the gesture laden with the philosophy of his burdens. "Redemption is no cage, Viraya, but a forge," he replied, his rumble low and resonant, carrying the weight of seasons spent in atonement's shadow. "I carried guilt like a blade in my chest, believing my mercy doomed us all. Your light reveals the truth. Strength lies not in power's iron grip, but in choosing compassion amid the storm. We sacrifice the illusions of freedom, mine for a realm unchained by treachery, yours for a path that guides without devouring. Together, we heal what was broken, proving the goddess's design." The words settled over her like a cloak of warmed fur, chasing the despair that had long nested in her exile. Outside, the wind howled its farewell, Weavos distant now, as if the wolves themselves acknowledged the shift. Viraya leaned into him, the heat of his body a counterpoint to the cavern's lingering chill, her head resting against the steady thunder of his heart. Tenderness unfurled slowly, born from the pain's embers. A brush of his lips against her temple, soft as falling snow, carrying the faint scent of smoke and ancient oaths. The scar and torque pulsed in harmony, their light weaving a subtle aura that extended outward, soothing the pack's lingering fractures. Thorn rising unsteadily, his defiance yielding to a bowed head, the elders' whispers turning to chants of renewal under the fractured moon. They emerged from the cavern's maw as dawn's first blush kissed the horizon, the storm's fury spent, leaving a landscape of pristine white, veined with crimson remnants of the night. The trial ring stood transformed, no longer an arena of death, but a cradle of renascimento, its stone walls glistening under the moon's fading vigil. The packs parted before them, their eyes reflecting a mix of awe and tentative faith, the air alive with the crunch of snow under countless paws and the soft hush of breaths held in reverence. Irik's hand remained in hers, a union sealed not by force but by choice. Their steps synchronized as they ascended the tiers toward the elders' thrones. Viraya felt the rebirth settle deep within, a spiritual alchemy turning rejection's ash into the gold of purpose. Her gift as pathfinder, now a beacon for the clans, guiding them through wars yet to come, her scars a testament to mercy's triumph over despair. But the horizon whispered of trials enduring, southern shadows gathering like storm clouds, destinies intertwined, demanding vigilance eternal. In Irik's quiet gaze, she saw the proof of love's redemptive fire, not a reward snatched from fate, but a flame kindled through sacrifice, illuminating the path where freedom and union converged. The moon dipped low, its light fracturing one last time on the snow, a poetic benediction on souls reborn in blood and light. Under that celestial watch, Viraya knew the true strength, choosing to heal, even when the heart bled for the liberty lost. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.